This tutorial explains how to cite and reference your sources using the 7th edition of the APA-style manual. The purpose of a citation is to appropriately acknowledge the sources of ideas and expressions you use in your written work, whether quoted directly or paraphrased. This applies to images as well as to written material, and materials or information from internet sources. Citation of a source implies that you have personally read the cited work. APA style uses the author date citation system. This system allows readers to easily find the cited sources within the reference list. Citations have two formats, parenthetical and narrative. In parenthetical citations, the author name and year of publication appear in parentheses either within or at the end of a sentence. Note that when the citation is at the end of a sentence, the period is placed after the citation. It is recommended that the page number be included when you are citing lengthy works such as books. Obviously, you will be writing something more profound than blah blah blah. In narrative citations, the author name is incorporated into the sentence and the date is included immediately after in parenthesis. The page number appears at the end of the sentence, or the part of the sentence that relates to that source. Notice that when there are two authors, an ampersand is not used in the sentence. If there are 3 or more authors, include only the name of the first author, followed by et al. In every citation. This is a change from the previous edition of the APA manual. Et al. Means and others, and there is a period after al. When citing multiple works parenthetically, place the citations in alphabetical order, separating them with semicolons. If multiple works are cited within the narrative of a sentence, they can appear in any order. Sometimes a group or organization is the author of a source. This would apply to documents published by the Department of Education as well as many websites. If the name is long, and you will be citing this author more than once, then use the full name the first time, followed by the abbreviation in square brackets in a parenthetical citation. And before the date in a narrative citation. In subsequent citations, you would just use the abbreviation. When citing a source with no date, which commonly occurs with web pages, use ND instead of the year. Put a period after the N and after the D, with no space between the letters. Of course, if there is no date, it is impossible to determine the currency of the information, which may be an important consideration. When a source does not have page numbers, you need to provide readers with another way to find the original information. You can include the paragraph number, a heading or section name, or both, if the sections are lengthy. Acknowledging the source of quotations is done in the same manner as the previous examples. The only difference is that quotation marks are used around the words copied from the source. Quotes that are longer than 40 words are formatted differently. However, since quotations, especially long quotations, are used sparingly, if at all, in academic papers, I will skip that explanation. Do not include initials or suffixes such as junior in a citation, only the surnames of individual authors. Use only the year in a citation, even if the reference list entry contains a more specific date. Do not include the title of the source in the text. This information is provided in the reference list. The purpose of the reference list is to help readers find the sources you used. Therefore, it should be as accurate as possible. The reference list should only include sources that are cited in the paper, and all sources cited in the paper should be included in the reference list. At first glance, a reference list can look complicated and intimidating. However, upon closer analysis, all references contain the same type of information, which is always arranged in the same order, although that order varies between the different style types. In APA style, the order is who, when, what, where. And each element ends with a period. Who is responsible for this source? Often this is one or more individuals who authored the work, but as previously noted, it could also be an organization or a government department. Note that when individuals are the author, all the names are inverted, with the surname provided first, followed by a comma, and the initials of their given names. When there is more than one author, use a comma to separate an author's initials from additional author names, and use an ampersand before the final author's name. Include all of the authors in the reference, in exactly the same order as they are listed on the source. When was it produced? Typically this is the year the work was published, but may include the month or month and day for magazines, newspapers, and web pages. The date is placed in parentheses and ends with a period. What is it called? This is the title of the book, article, web page, image, etc. The title of the source should be in italics. The one exception is the title of a journal article, it is not italicized. Notice also that only the first word in the title and subtitle are capitalized. This rule applies to all titles. Finally, where can it be obtained? The information to include here will depend on the type of source. For a book or other printed document, it is the name of the publisher and the DOI, if one has been assigned. Note that the location of the publisher no longer needs to be included, since an online search makes a work easily discoverable without it. If the author is also the publisher and the book or document is only available in a printed format, no publication information needs to be included. If the author is also the publisher and the book or document is available online, include the URL of the website. For an article in a journal, the publication information includes the name of the journal, which is placed in italics with all of the major words capitalized, the volume number, followed by the issue number in parenthesis, and the page range. Each of these elements are separated by a comma. The DOI must be included if one has been assigned, and it is presented as a hyperlink. The information to include when the source is a web page depends on whether there is an identified author. When the author of a web page is different than the person or group who created the website, include the name of the website in the publication information, followed by a period and the URL of the page. The URL should be presented as a hyperlink, and it is acceptable to use a URL shortener. Because a hyperlink leads readers directly to the content, it is not necessary to include the words retrieved from or accessed from. When the author of a web page is the same as the website name, do not include the site name in the publication information to avoid repetition. In this case, simply include the URL of the web page. One other source you may want to reference are course materials on a learning management system, which in our case is UMlearn. Since access to these materials is restricted to those enrolled in the course, they wouldn't typically be included in a paper written for professional publication or intended for a wider audience. However, since the audience you are writing for, typically the instructor and perhaps your classmates, can access these materials, they can be included in a student paper. Not surprisingly, the reference components remain the same. For my courses, I am the author and the material was created this year. For any material not created by me, for example, videos and links to other sources, I have provided the reference. The title should include the course number, and the name of the specific page. The publication information should include the name of the LMS, and since you need to log in to access the materials, the URL to the login page is provided. Entries in the reference list should be ordered alphabetically by author name. If you have more than one source with the same first author, move across the elements until you find a difference. For example, if there is a second author, use their name to arrange the entries. If they are the same, move to any additional authors until there is a difference. If there are no additional authors or they are the same for two or more sources, use the date to organize those sources chronologically from oldest to most recent. If the sources have the same first author and were published in the same year, use the title to arrange them alphabetically. In this situation, you also need to add a lowercase letter after the year. These letters are also included in the citations to make it clear which source is being cited. If the sources have the same first author and there is no date of publication, include a dash before the lowercase letter. Hopefully this tutorial will help you properly cite and reference your sources in APA style. Obviously it is difficult to summarize over 50 pages of the manual in a few slides, so be sure to review the additional resources provided on UMlearn.